Kyle Malnati. I've been orchestrating our 30 Under 30 Mastermind conference call for about 2.5 years. This is call number 29, actually. And I'm real excited to have you guys on the line with me. Just to get things kicked off for anybody that doesn't know each other, and I know some of us were at the Boston Mastermind a few months ago, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn on my screen here, and I can see most of you as I'm orchestrating this call. So I'm going to start with Ryan. Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself and mention what city you live in and what type of product you typically sell or focus on.
Yeah, Ryan Gillen, Dayton, Ohio, just the southwest region of Ohio, mostly residential property, and then been doing some investments, single family homes and some multi-units as well. Actually close on a property next week with James Nellis, who was I guess he headed the mastermind in Boston. So he actually bought a property in Dayton. So we do a little bit of everything here.
Well, that's cool. I'm not sure that that's the very first 30 Under 30 investment together, because I know that James and Bo do some investing, but that's really cool to do some out-of-state investing with James.
Yeah, it was. So it was definitely worth it for the Boston trip.
Oh, that's awesome. Good job. Well, congratulations on that. What type of property are you buying, Ryan?
It's a duplex. It's about a 3,000 square foot duplex in a nice little city. So it'll be a good return for them. So
nice. Well, good for you guys. I specialize in selling apartment buildings here in Denver, and so that's something that's near and dear to my heart for sure. Saria looks like she's talking to someone else. So Dominic, I'm going to go with you. A couple of things you might want to look at, Dominic, is I'm not sure that your audio is hooked up. If you can hear me, would you say hello? And let me make sure I can hear you. Let's see if there he is. He may be having some trouble there. Sarah Lyons, I've unmuted you. Why don't you say hello to the group, introduce yourself, and say where you currently live and do business, and what type of real estate you typically sell.
Sure. So I am in Fort Worth, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I live about 45 minutes out of Fort Worth. That's actually what I'm doing, is driving to work. I sell exclusively residential, specializing in single family, and I try to do as many listings as possible.
Awesome. And I forgot to ask this to Ryan. I will in a second, but also mention what role you play if you're a loan agent, if you're a team leader, if you're a company owner. What type of role do you play, Sarah?
Okay, I'm an individual agent, and I have a part-time assistant.
Great. And Ryan, I'll unmute you as well. If you could share with the group what your role is within your organization.
I have a team of 7 agents, and I still buy and list homes, but I'm the team leader, and just to make sure everybody's in the right position to sell as many homes as possible. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Saria, you're next. I'm going to unmute you. If you introduce yourself, tell everybody.
Hey guys, I'm actually in a closing, so I'm not going to be able to chat right now. I'm just listening.
Man, you are multitasking like nobody's business. Well, I'll mute.
Good to talk to you guys, though. Hi.
Good to talk to you too. Focus on your closing. That's awesome. All right, so Mary, I'm going to unmute you, and if you would introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're from, your involvement in real estate, both what type of product you sell, as well as how your team, if you have a team, is constructed.
Sure. I'm Mary Harmon. I am down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and unfortunately, it is me, myself, and I. So I do residential real estate, and I have been struggling and trying to find hires, but unfortunately have not found anybody that fits the team yet. So,
well, you know what? I've been in that position, and we'll probably talk a little bit about going from loan agent with an assistant to team leader to company owner, which is my role now. So hopefully we can help you through that a little bit, or at least offer some encouragement.
Great.
Thanks for joining us, Mary. So I'm going to mute you real quick. Melissa, I'm going to unmute you. If you'd introduce yourself to the group, tell everybody where you're from and what type of real estate you sell, and then also what your role is within the organization that you work at.
Sure. Thanks so much for hosting this today. By the way, this is pretty cool.
You're welcome.
I'm excited to be here with everyone. I'm obviously Melissa Shipley from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I basically focus on residential real estate. I'm an individual agent. I'm starting to set up a team right now. So some of the stuff going back and forth on the forum about like how you set up teams and things like that has been really interesting to me to watch. I have a part-time assistant at the moment, and I'm just getting ready to bring on my first buyer's agent. And I am definitely looking for any sort of guidance or tips that anyone else has used to get things in place. And I'm definitely kind of like Mary, seeing that it's challenging to find somebody that fits the team, fits your work ethic, and you know, is the right person to join. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big deal, I think, for everybody making that next move. I'm going to try to circle back with you, Dominic. I think I've got your audio figured out here. You're unmuted. Can you hear us, Dominic?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear. So introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're from, what type of real estate you sell, and also your role within the organization that you work at. Dominic, I lost you. Sorry, Dominic, I'm not hearing you. Can anybody else hear him? No? Yes, no, no. Hey, Dominic, I lost you, man. Something going on. All right, so Dominic, sorry I lost you. Something's going on with your audio there. We'll get it figured out. I'm gonna try to unmute you once more and try that again. We'll see here. The other thing too, Dominic, if you can, no one can hear you. So use the chat if you'd like, Dominic, and we'll figure this out. The other part of it too is you may have to log out and log back in, because upon your login, it's going to ask if you want to connect over your computer speakers or over the phone or however that works. So give it a try and we'll get it figured out. Sorry, man. But if you drop it in the text, I'll introduce you to everybody on your behalf. My man, Jordan Bennett, what's going on? How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
Good deal. Well, Jordan is not a part of the most recent class, but is a good buddy of mine. And Jordan, thanks for joining us on the call. Share with everybody which class you're a part of, where you're from, what type of real estate you sell, and your involvement in the organization you work with.
Yeah, good morning. I think I believe it's either the 14 or the 15 class. It was the year I was turning 30. I'm turning 33 this year. So I guess it was about 3 years ago.
Okay.
I sell residential real estate down here in Orange County, California, where we kind of get to cheat and have big volume numbers and not as many units as the rest of the country. I've got a team. I've got 4 agents on the team, an EA, a marketing director, and then my wife helps in the business on the event side.
That's great. Thanks for joining us on the call. It's always good to have a couple of grizzled veterans over 30. So I was part of the class of 2012. So I think I may be the oldest on the line here. The only person that I haven't talked to is this person in the 702, but it doesn't show what their name is. I've unmuted you there if you're in the 702 area code.
Hi, this is Shyla McGee. I am in Las Vegas, Nevada. I do residential real estate, and just like Mary, it is me, myself, and I. So
awesome. So what we'll do, and Dominic, I'm going to get you, let's try one more time here if we can get you. I've got you unmuted, Dominic.
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right. I have to apologize. I'm at my house right now, and I live in the middle of nowhere. And so my internet or my phone, internet, everything can be quite hectic. So I apologize.
Well, tell us where the middle of nowhere is.
So I live in Stanwood, Washington. My office is in Burlington, Washington. It's in the Northwest. It's a heavy farming community. Not a ton of big industry. Most of our industry is either north of us up in Bellingham or south of us in Seattle. And everything I do is residential. There's 4 of us, including me on my team. And we're all licensed. One's admin, does paperwork, transactions, all that. And the rest of us are doing sales. So that's about it.
Awesome. So for everybody that joined in late or maybe didn't hear the intro to the call, my name's Kyle Malnati, and like I said, I was part of the class of 2012. There's a couple things that we've got going on before we get into our topic. You know, the real goal and the purpose of this call was to circle the wagons with the newest class, make sure that you had an ability to get to know each other. I have had the fortune of hosting this call for over 2.5 years. And I did it at the prompting of Luke Bowman, who was part of the class of 2013, because Luke said, you know, hey, we really should have more monthly access to our network and our group. And so I took the ball and ran with it and have hosted a conference call basically every single month since 2015. I am going to be sunsetting that responsibility, and I'm going to step away from it for a couple of reasons. I'm hosting the Denver Mastermind. For those of you that went to Boston, it's a big event. It's a reunion of ours as a 30 under 30 alumni network, and that's a huge undertaking, and that's going to be next spring. So I've got to clear some room for myself to get that event done. And so I wanted to talk to you and just mention the idea that I'd love to pass on the torch and have someone continue to run with this alumni network. It's a very low level of involvement and responsibility, but it's something that has really enriched my life and has put me on a couple of paths that I didn't expect. One of which is I'm writing a book where I've interviewed over 25 30 under 30 alumni and talk to them about best practices, talk about how you win in real estate, talk about how you get up from failure. Basically it's sort of like John C. Maxwell's book, Failing Forward, but for real estate agents. So that was something I never expected and would not have been possible without this network and without this conference call. The other thing that I absolutely was able to do because of this conference call is have the courage to start my own brokerage, which happened in November. So we're all busy, and that's a relative statement depending on what you're doing. But what I want to do is just put that idea out there. No commitment for anybody at this point about hosting the conference call. But what I'd like for you to do is to give that some thought, see if it's something you're willing to do. And with a lot of training wheels, I'll definitely help everybody with that if you're interested in actually hosting this call going forward. So this is not the last call. Actually, next month is going to be our last call where I'll have, or at least the last call that I host, where we'll have the opportunity to involve our greater network. So that's just something to be thinking about, especially for the new class. If you want to get to know some of the older 30 under 30s and really grow by learning from them, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity. So just think about that and reach out to me if you've got questions about potentially hosting this call going forward. And I'll have some ideas and talk to you offline about that. Jessica, I see that you've logged in. I'm going to unmute you. If you've never used Zoom before, just hang on just a second. So you can unmute yourself at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. You can also mute yourself if you need to. You can also turn off your video if you ever need to, if you've got to step away or something like that. But what we're doing is we're going to introduce each person, and that's already happened. So introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, what type of real estate you sell, and your involvement within your organization, whether you're an individual or a team lead or a company owner. So fire away. You're unmuted, Jessica. Oh, but I can't hear you. Something going on with your audio there. I'm going to try to I'll mute you and come back to you. Let's try that again. The other thing to think about, Jessica, is there's a chat thread at the bottom in the middle of the screen. If you want to drop that in there, you might need to pause your recording, or you might need to pause yourself and then start it over. Oh, I gotcha.
Is that good?
I can hear you. There you go.
Sorry. My name's Jessica Thompson. I live in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I work for Lockswood Real Estate. It's a small firm. There's about 5 of us. I'm an individual realtor, no team, and I do residential real estate.
Great, and thank you for joining us, Jessica. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw out the topic that I put over email and in Facebook. If you didn't see it, I'll read it to you again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work around the room. So if you haven't gotten an answer, you can tell me pass, and then I'll go to someone else who has the answer, and we'll go from there. So what I'd like to know from each of you is talk to me about one of your bigger failures in business and the steps that you took to overcome that. And I'll start out so that everybody can take a moment to think about that. So I'm a big proponent of learning, learning through failure. And it's just one of the ways that I've found myself most effective in life. It's unfortunate that I have to put my hand on a hot stove to realize that it'll burn me, but I tend to learn through mistakes. And I think the biggest thing is if you've got non-fatal failure that you can learn from and get up and move on, that's really what marks a champion. We're not always going to win, but it's what we learn during our losses or learn during our difficult experiences that I think is important. The name of my company is Calibrate Real Estate, and the word calibrate is very intentional. It means to iterate, make adjustments, make course corrections, and it's usually used in science and military. So for me, the biggest failure I've had, and I've had a lot of them, is probably hiring. Hiring as a company owner is still difficult for me. I'm in the process of hiring another person to add on to our into our group. The current structure of my team is I'm the company owner. I've got a main listing agent that is my brokerage partner. We split each one of our listings 50-50, but he's not an equity owner in the company. Secondarily, I've got a transaction coordinator that is full-time that works on our team, and she does basically runs through every single transaction that we have. And she really acts like an agent. In my business, selling commercial real estate, we have a lot of due diligence, a lot of lease review, a lot of profit and loss review. And so she really keeps us organized and takes control of deals once they go under contract, and really keeps track of our dates and deadlines and just makes sure that we're in compliance. So she's really like a compliance officer. I've got a new broker that we hired about 6 months ago, and he is sort of like a buyer's agent, but in our business, we focus on listings more often. So he's doing both buyer work and listing work, and he is just knocking it out of the park. And so this new person we're going to be hiring is going to be for an admin assistant role. It's going to be part-time, which at first I was kind of a little reluctant about, but I'll explain to you why we decided to do that. But, you know, the reason why we're having to hire this new person is after I started the company in November, our key marketing coordinator decided to quit 3 months after we started the business. And that really hurt me. It really hit me to the core, because it was someone that was young and they were on fire and they were really smart. And I just felt like they were going to be a winner in our organization. And so I would say for me, the steps that I take to try to overcome hires that haven't worked is that I try to ask others what their, you know, different best practices are. There's a coaching program that I've been involved in for a long time that has a hiring process that I can share with each of you. But I think what I try to do on each hire is learn from the last and try to make some of those course corrections. One of which is we created an 8-step questioning process to pre-screen anybody that applies for a job that we put out to Craigslist or Facebook. And those questions are designed to, like I said, pre-screen people before we ever interview them on the phone. What we want to try to do is minimize our amount of interactions with someone in person. We want to try to vet someone before we ever bring them into our office, both to save them time and to save us time. And so what I've learned over several kind of misses on the hiring process is trying to include more steps and more company involvement instead of just having it all flow through me. So that saves me a little bit of time, but it also gives me some wise counsel to surround me and make sure that we're making a good hire that's going to fit for everybody instead of just fit for me. So hiring for sure is probably my biggest failure. Ryan, since I know you well, you're going to be on the hot seat. Maybe talk about your biggest failure or the things that you struggle with and steps that you're trying to work through to overcome them. You're unmuted now.
Yeah. So first, probably my biggest, I don't know if it was a failure, but it was more of a mindset failure. Right off the bat, we're all young people here. I started real estate when I was 24. I just didn't have confidence. I'm like, why would someone want to buy a house from me? I went on a listing appointment by myself without my father. I got the listing and I walked out and I was like, man, I can do this. And then we ended up having a great transaction. The person told me, I could have done it without you. And I'm like, wait, I can do this just as good or if not better than anybody else. And the moment my mindset changed to say, you know what, I can do this better than everybody else, regardless of my age, because I'm putting more effort into it. I'm studying and I'm being a professional. People don't care about your age. It just took me about 18 months to 2 years to realize that they don't care about their age. They just want a great real estate professional, regardless of if you're 80, or 27. They just want someone that's going to be there for them and be knowledgeable and professional. So the moment I changed my mindset to going into an appointment going, I don't care what my age is, but by God, I'm going to be the most professional and knowledgeable out of anybody. They'll see right through your age, which is great. But for a while, I was nervous about going into appointments and stuff. So that was probably my biggest was confidence. And then my one mistake I made on building my team was where it sounds like a lot of people are right now is that first hire. Well, my first hire was great. She's awesome. She still works with me right now, but she's actually she's a buyer's agent now, but she was my first assistant. But I hired her too late. I knew I was getting busy, and I was working 17-hour days, and I just couldn't keep up. And so I was like, man, I need to hire someone. Well, it was too late, because when I hired her, we sold a bunch. Then all of a sudden we hired our next buyer's assistant, but we didn't have time to get any systems in place. So then once this market kind of slowed down in the wintertime, we could go back, but it was like 6 months into it. But if I could have any advice, it would be, if you feel like you need to hire an assistant, hire them, because you do, because the storm's coming, because everybody here is on the uprise. There's no one in this group that's going, hey, I want to stay stagnant. We're all wanting to grow. So if you feel like you need that buyer's agent after your first assistant, you need to start looking well before you think you actually need to start looking for one. So then when you do need one, you're not going to go, man, I can't find anybody that meets my goals. Well, if you have 6 months to find them, you're going to find someone. So you just give yourself time. So go look for them well before you think you need them.
I love that answer, Ryan. Thank you. That, totally packed with lots of information there. And a couple of takeaways that I have from your answer is, one, on the confidence side of thing, I just had a discussion with our newest buyer agent yesterday, and I told him that knowledge builds confidence, especially when you're young and especially when you're new. And I think as a newer agent, you always want to do what you can to build your knowledge base, because the faster you can create experience, knowledge-based experience and or learned knowledge, I think that starts to show regardless of what your age is. And you made a great point that when people work with you as a younger agent, what they really want is they want someone that's professional. Obviously, they want someone that's knowledgeable, but they want someone that's there, that's present for them. And there's so many other agents that are going to look at a deal and say it's not really the type of thing that they should be working on, or they kind of do a halfway job at it. And so I think if you're there for people, and we all know this because we've all obviously been honored with something that's a pretty amazing national recognition, but loved your answers. And I think that mindset part of things is real important. Hiring, one thing that I have become aware of is that when you hire, a lot of times you continue working through a situation that you shouldn't have been doing. Like you said, working 17 hours. And a lot of that is because as you have that income creep, a lot of people enjoy that and say, I deserve this and I really want it, instead of taking that, setting it aside and saying, I'm going to continue working on whatever salary or whatever budget that I have, and I'm going to take this new income aside and hire someone with it. And I think that's where people end up getting burnt out, and hire by necessity instead of hire intentionally. And so
you'll end up putting yourself in a bad position if you. My team has not added another person in the last 8 months because we haven't had we don't need to, because we've hired the right people at the start. We never forced the issue. It was like, we were approached by a few people and they joined our team and they were just absolute perfect fits. Well, I have another agent joining in 1 month and he's a perfect fit. We're just waiting for those next people to come along that are perfect. So the moment you force the issue, and you're never going to get someone that works as hard as you and is as focused as you, no matter what. But if you can get someone that's close, that's great. But the moment you force the issue and you get the average Joe agent that doesn't just care as much and just really is half-assing it, I would say, because let's get in real estate because I can make my own schedule stuff, like your brand will go downhill quick.
Absolutely. So everybody, I spent a little bit more time with Ryan for a few reasons. One, I know him pretty well. We got to interact with each other in Boston. The other part of that too is he's running a pretty large team, especially for individual agents. So I wanted you to hear and reflect on his answer before I went to each of you. So I'm going to go back in the order that we started in. Sarah, you're next. I'm going to unmute you, Sarah Lyons. Go ahead, talk about maybe one of your bigger failures and how you worked through it. What steps you took to work through that failure?
So when I got the question, I did some thinking, and I actually asked my husband and was like, what would you say the answer is? And he told me to say answering this question was my hardest failure. That was his answer. But no, in all seriousness, I feel like a lot of my kind of challenges came before getting into real estate and caused me to work so hard in this industry with basically the necessity of, we had no money, we had to figure out how to pay the bills and put food on the table. And I got a Groupon for my real estate classes, and I started balls to the wall from day one because this is the only income that we were going to have. But I would say that on a daily basis, my biggest struggle and difficulty is that feeling like there's still more that has to be done, that I'm not getting what I need done just because there's not enough time in the day, and I'm staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning and I've just got to go to sleep. And I finally, after 3.5 years of being in the business, started to feel more comfortable with, you know what, that feeling's okay. I can just go ahead and decide to go out on a date, and my clients are just going to have to wait till tomorrow. I know that I have 3 things to do tonight, but I'm just going to have to let it be okay. So getting comfortable with that feeling.
That's huge. You know, one of the things that I observed, especially when I was a solo agent, is this this savior complex that that you're there to save the world's problems. And I'm a big believer, and I've got a strong faith. And I'm no one's savior. I have my own savior, and that's God. And so I think for us, if we can detach ourselves from the reality that, look, your doctor might literally be able to save your life, but his office isn't open at all hours. You know, same thing for you. Set concrete hours and stick to them. And I think that that's really important. The budgeting piece and the financial piece, I think, is really, really important that you touched on, Sarah. And I think that's something that as we grow as agents, you hit different levels of importance with both personal and business financing. So that's financial awareness.
That brought me a lot of peace.
Go ahead.
The financial part has brought me a lot of peace. My undergrad is in accounting, and so we're working towards the year, always paying the IRS quarterly, all of that. So having that is a very be able to be like, okay, it's okay to tell my client, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do that tonight. I'll get with you tomorrow morning, a contract or whatnot. Absolutely.
I love that. I got my degree in finance, and so we're kind of similarly minded. One of the things that I have picked up in the last 6 months that I'd love to share with everybody is that your business is a for-profit business. And if you don't take profits off the top before you spend your other expenses, when you have commissions, you'll have a very difficult time having a profitable business. So what I've started to do is anytime we get a commission, I've set a percentage of those commissions that I designate as profit, and I put it in a totally separate account right away so that it can't be spent. And we'll see. This is a new project for me, but lo and behold, hopefully at the end of the year, I'll have a profit account. And at a worst case scenario, I'll have a retained earnings account for any emergencies. So something to think about, guys. Let's go with Mary. I'm going to unmute you. Talk about an area that you felt was like a big failure for you and steps that you took to overcome it.
I think that I'm currently in it and have been in a little while, in the sense that I don't have a CRM. So yes, I've sold 40 houses this year, and I've sold 60 last year, and hope to grow again. But I talk to my clients on a regular basis, thank God, because of Facebook, and I have a crazy memory, so I remember things and know that I'm supposed to call them, but I don't have any kind of a system. And so it's hard when I sit here and, it's like, I know I need a drip campaign. I know that those are certain things that need to happen to continue to grow. But luckily, I've never, there's very few clients that I've lost, from not having the traditional drip campaigns and things like that. But as I get busier, and then too, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so just life is busy. I know that there's business that I'm not touching, that there's people I see in the grocery store who say, hey, I'm thinking about selling. you know, and I'm like, oh, great, I'll touch base with you. And then 3 days later, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even touch base with them. And so most of the time they laugh and they're like, it's okay, the kids are screaming, you know, you probably didn't hear. But I just know that I'm not touching base with the people like I should. And I think if I could find that hire, that it could help me, because I spend that extra time trying to find somebody instead of, you know, planting those seeds that I need to be planting. So I guess, you know, that's, and I don't know if in other areas, if things are tough in the sense that, but like if I were to go ask, like we don't have a team in my entire market. So it's not even like there's anybody locally that I could go to and say, hey, what are you paying people? How'd you find them? How are you divvying up things? You know, we do live in Alabama, so we're nice and, you know, southern and hospitable, but there's not anybody to, you know, kind of lean on to get that assistance. So I think that's kind of where my biggest hurdle is right now, is knowing that I'm not doing things the way I should, and knowing that there's a different way to do it, but not exactly having the blueprints on how to do it.
Well, this is perfect, because I think I'd like to really dive into your issue, Mary, because I know all of us have had issues with hiring, and then we're going to have continual issues with it. So I'd like to kind of tag team this with Ryan and Jordan, because we both we all have teams. Give you some real concrete stuff here in Denver. My first hire was in 2011, and it was an administrative assistant, basically catch all, some gopher work, but also, you know, reviewing my emails and sending out brochures and making sure brochure boxes were filled and all that. I paid her $30,000 a year. My current TC, transaction coordinator, who's our chief of staff, she makes $40,000 a year. Our buyer's agent, we are on a 50-50 split with him before company splits. And then my brokerage partner, that, you know, he's kind of our lead lister, so that allows me to really run the organization and do more lead generation. He and I are on a 50-50 split, and that's how my team is organized. Ryan, how about you?
So I have a buyer's assistant and a listing assistant. They're straight commission based on how many sales they do. $150 per transaction for the buyer's assistant, and it's $200 for my deals, because I guess I'm harder to deal with. But it's $250 for my listing assistant, because it goes from doing the CMA to listing the house to getting it closed. So it's just a longer transaction. So she's straight commission. My buyer's assistants, and when they list houses, it's the same thing. If they get the lead from me through my websites, through other listings, all that, any lead that comes in that's from the Ryan Gillen team is 50-50. So we take the brokerage fee off, and then after that's 50-50. Then on leads that they bring in themselves and listings, they're on a incentive plan. So deals 1 through 4 for the year, they're on 50-50. Deals 5 through 8, they're on 55. Deals 9 through 12, they're on 60. And then at 13 plus deals for the year, they're on 65. But those are just the ones that they brought in. So it's an incentive plan. They should, on the way we have it set up, they should get to that 65 about midway through the year, if they're working.
That's awesome, Ryan. Thank you. Something I forgot to mention, but Ryan reminded me of it, is that on your first hire as an individual agent, I would strongly suggest hiring an admin, not a producer, because when you hire a producer, all you're going to get is more sales and less of someone to do something. And that ends up meaning that you're going to end up being the admin.
Does your admin, do you recommend they be licensed? Is kind of what I gathered from the Mastermind.
My TC got licensed 2.5 years after she started with us. So I do recommend that they get licensed if they're working on your contracts. Mm-hmm. If they're doing all sorts of other stuff, like simple stuff, like going and grabbing dry cleaning, you know, picking up dinner. I mean, you can have a personal assistant and they don't need to be licensed at all. A lot of what we do in real estate is really kind of busy work. If you think about just the things that are true income producing activities, you do that very seldom throughout the day. So I think when you have an admin, you can have two sides of it. You can have someone that keeps track of your transactions, and they probably should be working towards getting licensed. But if it's someone that's just helping you, I don't think that they need to be licensed. It depends on what you really feel like you need help with. If you feel like you're slipping on your contract items, you probably want to make sure that gets taken care of, so that you can continue being the vocal person with your client and not have to deal with the admin side. Ryan, how about you?
My first admin was licensed. She was showing a lot of houses, and I just figured that would just be easier. She's now not my buyer's assistant anymore. She's a full-time agent because she got so busy, and we hired someone else. My buyer's assistant now years that came over, so she's fantastic. She knows everything, but it can go both. One for me, I like to have them licensed just because there's no gray area. They can give them advice, and I don't have to be there at all. So I, I've had all it seemed to work out so far. And then they can, if I'm gone on a trip or something, they can go show my clients and stuff. So.
Jordan, I've unmuted you because I'd love to get your feedback on running a team and just some salary structure and compensation. And then once you give that feedback, I'd love to have you answer the question on just things that you've learned through failure and the steps that you took to overcome it.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. So I have my main gal, my EA she's so much more than an executive assistant. And I think it's all about, Gary Keller teaches me that, it's all about finding empire builders out there that can really help you grow to the next level, not just finding, a hire, but finding somebody who's going to be a part of your organization for the long term that's just going to skyrocket you. So that's my EA, that's my main gal. So she started with me actually part-time. And I think for agents that are hiring their first assistant, what I did is I split her with somebody else. When I first brought her on, I went to another agent. I said, hey, we both need help. We don't want to bring on a full salary. Why don't we work together and at least share somebody? And that was a double-edged sword because on the one hand, it was more affordable. The challenge is we reached kind of this tipping point where I needed her. We both wanted her full-time. And so I ended up winning that arm wrestle. And I have her with me now. She's been with me for about 3 years, full-time, about 4.5 years, including the part-time. So I started her at about 40 a year. Now with bonus, she's making about 75 a year. And then I have a full-time marketing assistant that I just hired at 45 a year. And then all of our agents on the team are on a 50-50 split.
Well, that's
so that gives
feedback.
you kind of, yeah.
So on the next question, just an area of failure, and then Ryan, I'll get to you. Actually, Ryan, jump in real quick. What were you going to say?
My agents or my assistants are on a commission base because our average sale price is like $100,000, $150,000. So I don't have them on salary. I have them on commission per transaction. So we're going to do 200 transactions this year. Commission won't work if you're in LA and you're doing 30 transactions for a team. So just kind of throwing that out there real quick. So kind of judge where you're at. For me, I'm doing 200 transactions at 150 a pop, 100 a pop. So that's why we're on that.
That's a great point. If you're a volume business, you want to maybe do it per deal. If you're like me and like Jordan, where we're selling $2 to $4 million properties, either in luxury or in commercial, you're definitely going to want to be looking at it from a salary standpoint, or salary, maybe a base plus bonus structure. Jordan, talk about failure, especially having been in this group for a couple of years now. What are some of the things that you learned to overcome, and how did you overcome those failures?
I'd say I've been really blessed on the administrative side as far as hiring. My challenge continues to be on the sales side and finding good salespeople. And I think my continual challenge and failure, which I wish I could say I've overcome and then passed it, but I continue to hit my head against it, is really hiring by default instead of by design is really my biggest challenge. People come to me, I want to be on your team, and not really going through, not every time. Sometimes I do, but consistently going through the proper process of onboarding somebody and making sure that I'm bringing on the right people. Because otherwise, you can have a sales team that's just basically a revolving door. People are coming, people are leaving. I think on that side, one of the missing pieces for me is having really well-defined systems for how to bring somebody on board, how to get them into production, how to successfully mentor and coach and hold them accountable. And ultimately it comes down to that fine line that I think every entrepreneur walks, which is, that balance of working on the business and working in the business. And when you're growing a team and you're trying to leverage yourself, there's that constant dilemma of, hey, I'm good at the sales thing. I can do a lot of production. I can go out there and do a lot of my own business, but it's switching from, I to we to they. And that's what I continue to battle and fight against, is having other people actually work the business and working more on developing people than I am being strictly in production.
I love that answer, Jordan. And something that I thought about as you were providing that answer is that one of my hiring failures, and you just mentioned this, is, and that I've learned through it, is that I don't hire anyone anymore without a very detailed job description, which we call a KRA, a key results area, so that they understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing and what their role is on the team. And it doesn't limit them to just that KRA, but in the absence of me being available or someone that's managing them, it's like, here's what you need to be doing every day. And then obviously a system around that person should be creating the system for their role on the first hire. And that was something I had to learn the really hard way. I had a couple of hires in an admin role. And once you get that revolving door and there's no system around it, every time you feel like you're starting from square one instead of having a policy or a manual for that particular role. So that's learning it the hard way. Dom, I'm going to unmute you. Thanks for your patience. If I remember correctly, you lead a 4-person team. Is that right, in Washington?
Four with me. Yes.
4 with you. So you're the 5th person on the team. Okay.
Well, no. Four total. 4 including me.
Got it.
Sorry. Yeah.
I understand.
My bad. Yep. Maybe my math's a little off there. I like what everybody's saying on this, because I doubt there's anybody that has a team that hasn't had all of these little issues, at least at one level or another. And I would definitely like to repeat the thing you said about that first hire is probably best in an administration role rather than a sales role, because my first hire was a sales position. And, there's a lot I learned from that, which I'm glad I did, but it was not the right first hire. So I think that was huge. I know personally my biggest thing is consistency, staying consistent. I would say that having a team now has helped bring more consistency to my life than what I used to have, because for some reason letting myself down wasn't like too big of a deal, but letting other people down is a big deal for me. So having the team, makes me want to push harder and work harder and stay more consistent. But consistency is still a thing across all areas that I definitely have an issue with. And I'm also a big fan, in the wrong way, of shiny objects, like, oh, that looks fun, we should spend money on that. And so those are probably the two things that I wouldn't say were failures. I mean, they still are failures. It's ongoing, improvements. So
I love that. Chasing shiny objects, man. It's the blessing and the curse of being a realtor. You put a lot of stuff on the wall, but at the same time, that also therefore makes you overloaded, and that ability to constantly chase opportunity is one of the things that make us rainmakers and make us great lead generators. But it also overloads us. It's a very interesting situation for sure.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy spending money on new things, but it's still, there's times where I'm like, whoa, I have to slow down a little bit.
So for those that were in Boston at the Mastermind, I did a presentation called Dear Younger Me, and it's a chapter from my book, which is basically the concept is you're writing a letter to yourself now that you're 30, 40, 50, and in some cases, some of the 30 under 30 crew is in their 40s now. What advice would you give to yourself when you're 22? If you knew everything now, what advice would you give to yourself when you're 22? And one of the bigger things was personal finance and financial management. And especially in the recession, not getting a car with $1,000 payment was one of the bigger things that people had mentioned, and really kind of living within your means. So those are things that I think we all struggle with, and definitely in a business where people are looking at, what we're doing as we're driving around in a nice car. It's a difficult thing for some, for sure. Thanks, Dom. I appreciate it. All right, Melissa, you're now on deck, or actually in the batter's box, I should say. Thoughts on failure, things that you've had to learn the hard way, and steps that you took to overcome that failure.
Yeah. So I like to consider myself a work in progress here, sort of learning as I go as well. I could think of like 30 things that all come to mind. So hopefully this doesn't come out as like word vomit, but definitely learning to set the right expectation with the client, or even more so like for myself, I tend to say, oh yeah, I'll get that for you tonight. And I'm realizing that like I'm finishing up with this client at 9:30 p.m. That means I just committed myself to staying up till 11 or 12 to get that done. So I've started to get a little bit better with not putting so much pressure on myself, because I find that it's not even the client that's putting the pressure on me. It tends to be me that does it to myself. And I'm trying to get better with that. And it's funny, you know, I'll say, oh, I'll have that to you in the next day or two, which is not typically a statement that would come out of my mouth. I would usually say, I'll get that to you in a couple hours. And I don't get any pushback. You know, they say, okay, that sounds great. Because again, I've put that pressure on myself, not them. So, you know, working on that, certainly the work-life balance is something that I very much struggle with. I ended up finding myself divorced at 27, which for multiple reasons, but certainly partially because I just am all about work. That is who I am. That's just the way I've been my whole life. So checking that balance and learning how to delegate things. So I know I mentioned earlier that I'm just starting to try to form a team, and that's been like an ongoing process for like the last 2 years. And certainly some trial and error. And Kyle, I loved when you said that definitely hire like an unlicensed assistant or an office assistant first. That's huge. Having those steps to be able to know that you're consistent and you're going to grow. I think for me, I've learned the hard way that that is so important and so key. But then I sort of get the fear now, like I said earlier, I'm getting ready to bring on a buyer's agent. And I have that fear of, will I have enough business? Will I be able to support another person? So trying to overcome that is something that I'm working on. And, you know, I guess it's just my own fear, my own hesitation. So that's a big one for me that I'm working on right now.
Well, I think addressing that fear is important, and I think this is a great group to do that in. And I think I'm experiencing those same fears personally with adding a fifth, sixth person to our team. It's never easy. And I have heard from a lot of company owners and large team leaders that really your first 10 hires, your first 10 people are really scary because you're adding new layers of leadership as you get to 6 or 7 people. And when you get to 10, you can't really lead very effectively. The military has used this for a long time. There's sources that have this ratio in the Bible, and there's just other people that discuss this as well, that a 1 to 5 leadership ratio is probably about the most that you can handle. And I think that for me, as I'm approaching that 6th person, that's scary for me too. So I completely understand where you're coming from, Melissa, on that. The other thing that I wanted to say is thank you for sharing some things about work-life balance and your divorce. I think that as we all look at how important our business is, there can be collateral damage and some carnage on the side of the road. And I'm not trying to make light of your situation. That's real life stuff. And I think that that's huge that you shared that with us. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, Jessica, certainly last but not least. I was kind of giggling for a moment as I saw you yawning. I thought you were bored, but then I remember you saying that you were up until midnight doing work on your own. So I want you to answer the question, but I also want to address the question that you had a couple up in the chat thread, that you were talking with a gentleman that wants to get into the business. And you're kind of wondering if maybe you could mentor him, and that might be a good runway for you to have that first hire. And I have some advice around that. I certainly want some more context around it, but I would say that generally someone that's excited about the real estate business and wants to learn from a top producer is a great thing. I think you always want to establish a very strong expectation up front and make sure that that person understands, like, hey, look, I'm hiring you to help me. And therefore, you're going to get some help along the way. You're going to get some mentoring. You're going to have, really a right-hand seat on my team and understand exactly what makes me successful. But I'm not doing that so that you can go and be a competitor in 6 months. And so I would say that you want to make sure that you give them a 1 or 2 year expectation of what they're supposed to be doing for your team. So that's just a quick piece of advice on that question. But talk to us about failure for you and things that you've learned through failure and the steps that you took to maybe get out of a nasty situation. Go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a failure for me, but I had just started out in real estate and I got pregnant, and that was very new, and honestly I wasn't sure how I would be able to handle, because I was just starting out and it was slow for me. I'd started out in October, and in Oklahoma, real estate, and I don't know about you guys, but real estate really tends to slow down after school starts, and it doesn't pick up until about January when everyone's getting their taxes in. So for me, it was really tricky because now I almost actually got out of the business because I was just starting out, and then all of a sudden I'm pregnant and I didn't know how I would be able to show, and then having to take time off with the kid. And eventually I was able to look past it, and because I had this nervous feeling of, what are people going to think of me if I bring my baby with me to my showings? And ultimately that helped me. I think it humanized me as a person, and people saw me less as like a car salesman type mentality. They saw me as a true person that has a family and that cares. And so it wasn't necessarily a failure for me, but it was a big learning curve because I had to figure out, because my daughter stays with me too until she's 3. And she'll be in school in 2 years. So I still have her with me. But trying to figure out time and delegating my tasks on schedule, and having to work around having a kid plus inspection, showings, closings, just making sure there's somewhere for her to go. But that was probably the hardest thing for me was, being pregnant, having a kid, and not to mention what Ryan had kind of mentioned was age. Age was really tricky for me. I'm 27, and I think sometimes still people think that, I'm probably 20 years old and what do I know? But I really try to, show them that I'm knowledgeable in different areas. And I mean, most of my clients honestly are older people. I would say grandparents type age. I think they kind of look at me as someone that would take care of them. So that's sometimes that age is okay, but sometimes it's a little bit harder. And reaching out to millennials, I think has been my hardest thing. Is I am a millennial, but a lot of my clients are not millennials. So how do I tap into that better? I think that's been my failure so far, is not really being able to connect with millennials. And I'm working hard to try and change that. And by doing different things, advertising, I know I've talked to a couple of their 30 under 30 alumni, and getting ideas of what they do to attract people to their business. And I mean, I didn't go to college really. I did, but I didn't stay. I wasn't in like a sorority or a fraternity. And a lot of people I know that are millennials, they're buying from people that they were in like a sorority with or a fraternity. So I feel like it's kind of tricky because I don't have that type of network. I'm having to do my own form of networking, whether it's going out into neighborhoods or getting involved with city things like city planning department. I go to a lot of their meetings and meet a lot of people that way, and just learning more about ways to help our city, because our city is a very small city. It's very young, built in 1907 or established in 1907. So there's constant talk about new things that we can do, whether including, commercial development, which I think a lot of older cities are seeing today. They're seeing their downtowns kind of go through this renaissance, and our city is definitely going through that. And I've been trying to tap into different meetings just to find out what's going on, so I'm more educated about, what's going on, and I can share that with potential buyers as well. So I think that I'm working that out slowly but surely.
Well, there's a lot in that, and I'll talk about family in a moment, but the thing you were talking about most recently is building your network and advertising. And I think that, that Jordan will say amen to this, but in this business, listers last. And with listings, you have leverage. And I think that there's a movement in some of the younger realtors that sphere of influence business is the only way to sell real estate. And I think that the geographic farmer is dying. And if you notice who the big powerhouse geographic farmers in our business are, they're all 50 and 60 and 70 years old. I have really committed to a geographic farm. We do a lot of mail, like hard mail pieces. And that tends to yield results year after year without us having to do a lot of one-on-one prospecting. So I think that's a suggestion, and I certainly don't know anything about the area that you're in Oklahoma, but that's just something that I have observed over time. Second thing I would say about family, when I was given the 30 under 30 recognition, my wife and I had just gone from a family of 3. We had a 16-month-old daughter to welcoming the birth of our twins. So we had 3 kids under the age of 18 months. Now my wife was, at that time, she was working full-time. She decided to stay at home and be a full-time stay-at-home mom, but that matures you in ways that no other 27 or 28-year-old is going to be able to compete with. And so I think while it's difficult on the front end, you will be so much better once you get to the point where your kiddos in preschool. And I'll tell you what, hallelujah, my kids are all in elementary school now. This past year, I had 2 kindergartners and a first grader, and it was beautiful. My wife has got some breathing room for once. Everybody is doing their own thing. They can make their beds, they can get dressed in the morning, they can pick their cereal. I mean, it's really cool. So you're there, you're almost there, even though it feels like you're still in the weeds. So I hope that helps.
Can I mention,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think too, with like networking listing, I'm finding that Facebook, I'm getting a couple of people from Facebook advertisements, social media, but ultimately I agree with you on the listings. I consider myself like a neighborhood realtor. But it's kind of hard to make a living in my neighborhood because it is going through like a renaissance. And so one thing I've started doing is mail outs. Whenever I list a house in my neighborhood, I put out a postcard. Whenever I sell that house in my neighborhood, I'm putting out a postcard. And I'm wondering if maybe I should, really capitalize on that 30 under 30 and mail that out to my neighborhood as well, and figure out some kind of way to advertise and put out that, hey, neighborhood realtor 30 under 30 wants to help you sell your home or something like that. Would you recommend doing like a 30 under 30 type mail out as well?
Absolutely. The way you do it is so critical though. So this is something that was a game changer for me. And I think a lot of realtors are great self-promoters. That's by nature what we do. And what ends up happening sometimes is people who are not self-promoters think it's a lot of humble bragging. So Harrison Beecher taught me this, and several others did, that when you announce an award, like this year I was Denver Business Journal 40 under 40. And what we made sure that we did is we highlighted that, but then said, hey, we couldn't do this without your support. So we're going to have a client appreciation event. We're going to say thank you to you that I won an award. And it takes a little bit of the focus off of you. So I think if you're trying to do some things in the neighborhood, whether it's a barbecue or community garage sale or some sort of 4th of July event or whatever it is in your town that you can latch onto, make sure that you don't miss the opportunity to say that you were Realtor Magazine 30 under 30 and you've got this elevated education and ability because of that recognition. But make sure that you don't make it completely about yourself. Try to involve your clients and say thank you. And what will happen is if you have existing clients at that event and then some new clients, they're going to do all the selling for you. You don't even have to do it. And that's the best thing, is when you can get a past client in the room with a future client, they'll be bragging on you in ways that you would never be able to do it. So I think you're onto something for sure. I would just make sure that you deliver it the right way.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
We're nearing the end of our time. We're right at an hour from when everybody really got on the call here. It's 5 after the hour. And I've always said this in the 29 calls that we have, the fact that 9 or 10 people will all take time from their busy schedule is certainly very humbling to me. The other humbling thing is if you just add up the dollar per hour that we all earn, this is a really expensive phone call, but at the same time, we all learn and we'll have the ability to earn more and grow better together. So I wanted to close the call with a couple of ideas. Just a reminder that next month's call, so we do this call on the third Wednesday of every month. So, so when we get into our next month call, July, that's going to be my last call that I'm hosting. I absolutely will help mentor anybody that wants to potentially be the host of this call. And I would think it's something you can do over a 1-year assignment. It doesn't have to be 2.5 years like I've done it. If you enjoyed this call and you felt like it added a lot of value, this has prompted me to start a coaching business, of which we'll be doing some online masterminds, one-on-one coaching, as well as annual events that I'll be hosting. And so if that's something that's interesting to you, it's a paid service. It's like a lot of coaching services, but this very call that I started 2.5 years ago has led me down that path to really encouraging and coaching other realtors. It's not always going to just be 30 under 30s, but if you are interested, I'll keep a 30 under 30 group running because it's a special group. And I probably want to keep that kind of that eagle mentality, that high soaring group together. So both of those things are on the table. If you want to host this call for our group, it's a great opportunity to get to know some of the older 30s. And if you want to be interested in joining the coaching program that I'm hosting, let me know about that and I can send you the marketing flyer, just let you know what the different rates are. So I appreciate everybody's time. This has been wonderful. You guys really lead this call. I just facilitate it and very appreciative of your time. If anybody has questions, let me know. Everybody that was on the call, I'm going to send to you a 12-step hiring process that I've used for several hires that I think will be helpful. You, like anything, use what you feel like is effective and take the best and forget the rest. So I just am appreciative of everybody and thank you guys very much. I hope you have an amazing, productive week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you guys real soon. Take care.
Take care.